Good morning. Welcome to Morning Monday Morning with Tanny. Today we are here to talk about the big book of grief rules. So what is the big book of grief rules? Well, it's this great big imaginary book that we carry around that are the rules that we've learned about grief and about mourning. They are the rules that we somehow learned as children, that we hear about in our work. We hear about, people talk about in our family, that we see in the media and in movies. They are the rules and the ways that we hear that we're supposed to behave and act when we're grieving somebody that we've lost. And today I want to talk about and hopefully give you some freedom to really start to write your own story. Because grief isn't ruled by anything. It's individual. It's as individual as your fingerprint. It's as individual as each grain of sand. It's yours. And to look at it from a list of rules, it's not going to be helpful. In fact, I believe it's harmful. I got this book and this topic many years ago, and I wish I could refer who gave it to me. I don't have the exact document with me, but I do know some of the questions that we can talk about to combat the rules that we've been given. So one of the rules in the big book of grief are, what are your acceptable responses to grief? So what do you think that is acceptable? What have you been told that is acceptable? What are your experiences that are acceptable? If you looked and flipped through the pages of your big book of rules, what would be acceptable? If anybody wants to suggest anything, they're totally welcome to in the chat. But one of the things that people talk about is it's acceptable to be sad, but you can't ever laugh. You can't ever show any signs of joy amongst your grief. It's acceptable to be sad, but not too sad. You don't want to make other people really uncomfortable with your sadness. And don't bring your sadness to a happy event. It's not acceptable. It's acceptable to be mad. Have any of you felt that it's acceptable to be angry? I feel like I've heard a lot of people say, I'm really mad that this person is gone and has left me. And other people are like, oh my goodness, you can't be mad at the dead. That's just wrong. It's not wrong. You can be mad. You can be hurt. You can feel lost. You can feel lonely. What about relief? Is that an acceptable feeling to have? I think it is, because it's just part of the mosaic of humanity. And grief is all of the feelings. All of the feelings, and they never know when they're going to show up. So I kind of went into the feelings part, but I also want to talk about the response. So I've heard about people who are like, oh my goodness, that person is just acting crazy since their person died. They have just all of a sudden went out and started shopping like crazy. Has anybody ever heard of a judgment like that? Or, oh, they just can't even get out of bed. I don't know what's wrong with them. How long does this take? Don't do this. Or what about responses like, they were so strong. Did you see that person? They are just carrying on. Like, what a trooper. Is that an acceptable response? We've been given so many ideas as to how you should respond. What do people think about people who are crying when you run into them in the grocery store? Is that acceptable? I think that all of the responses are acceptable. All of them are just people trying to figure out what to do with all of those things inside them and how to get them out and how to be heard. In the olden days, we had so many opportunities to talk about our loved one. We used to wear black, at least in the European tradition, for a year. You didn't wear black at other times. You wore the black, the mourning black, for a year so that people would talk to you over and over again and realize that you are feeling a huge and significant loss. So that leads into, how long is acceptable to be grieving? How long should the mourning process go? I've heard um, jobs where the mourning process should only last a few days, if any. I've heard about 6 months. 6 months is a good time. You should start to be changing how you're feeling by the time you get 6 months. Or a year. A year is a very common number that people hear. It doesn't work like that. And if you are watching this video, I bet you know it doesn't work like that. One of my favorite authors on grief, Megan Devine, she actually speaks about, at minimum, 2 years of a significant loss is still recent. 2 years. That's way longer than our big book of grief rules. So if you're feeling like you're judging yourself because you just can't seem to get over it and everything still seems messed up and you don't understand what's going on, it's probably because it doesn't stop. It changes. Your life transitions. But that mourning, that grief, that doesn't ever stop. It changes. The intensity and the frequency may change. It's going to fluctuate throughout the year. And that's okay. It's part of being human. There's no steps to go through. It's just a journey. And you're not sure when or where or how these things are going to happen. But hopefully you have a soft place to land somewhere and you have ways to express that physically. So how do you know if someone has a problem with grief? I can imagine people are saying, well, when they're crying all the time, or when every single time I talk to them, all they want to talk about is the person that they've lost, or they just can't seem to get back to work, or, oh my gosh, their life is in shambles, look at them, they just can't even brush their hair in the morning. There's so many judgments about what it looks like to grieve and what it looks like to grieve well. What it looks like is completely yours. You may need to take extra time away from work. You may need to have people come in and support you in ways that you didn't anticipate were going to happen. You may not care if you brush your hair. What's the point? Grieving well is your expression of grieving. It's not somebody else's example. It's not that stoic, I'm so strong person. Oh, wait, sometimes it is that person. Everyone will deal with it in different ways. We don't know what it looks like behind closed doors. We don't know what it looks like when that person is with somebody who's safe. You need to take time to make it yours, whatever you need it to look like. Another rule in the hierarchy thing is, in the book of griefs is the hierarchy. So lots of people have an idea as to which kind of grief is the most important or the most painful. So grief hurts. And I used to tell to people and say, well, all grief is similar and we need to deal with it. And it's true. When you're feeling pain, it's good to feel the pain. It's good to work through it. But there is something that makes grief kind of hierarchical. And that is your relationship to the person that died. So if you're somebody who had a terrible relationship with this person who was technically close to you in family, you had not had any time or experience with them in a very long time, it could be that your grief is really intense because you're grieving the loss of a relationship that didn't happen or was conflictual and could never ever be good again. Or it could be that you'd already grieved that person and they didn't really exist for you anymore at all. It can look different for everybody. Some people think that losing a child losing a preborn child, like having a miscarriage, is not a big deal. Other people, it's a huge deal. It all depends on how you feel about that loss, how you feel about that being. Prisma's asking, is it weirdly skipping around for anyone else or just me? Oh dear, I hope it's not terrible. Is it still doing it? Well, if anybody in the replay sees that, please let me know. Back to the hierarchy. Again, it depends. So you could have one grandparent die and another grandparent die, and your experience with each of those people is going to be very different depending on your relationship. And so whatever your experience is, it's yours. Don't need to discount it. You do need to feel it. But if someone is expressing that they're having a massive grief experience with somebody who you can't understand why they're having such a grief experience, give them space for that. Give them space and give them time. I've heard an example of having your toe cut off, painful, right? Or having your entire leg cut off, also painful. You want to acknowledge both of those pains, but it's very different. It's going to be very different learning how to live your life without a toe versus learning how to live a life without your leg. And that's how the grief hierarchy, in my mind, works. How are you going to live your life without that person? Well, hopefully I can get a solid internet connection, Prisma, and that will work better. But thank you so much for your input. I appreciate that. So those are a couple of things that happen during a like when you're thinking about your grief rules, what's acceptable. When you're looking at yourself or you're looking at people around you, start to critically think about those judgments that pop into your mind, whether they're judgments about somebody else's grief or your own, and say, where are these coming from? Because they're coming from a society that's trying to erase grief and make it not happen. And that just doesn't work. It happens. It happens to all of us sometime. I want to end on a sharing note. And if anyone else has any beautiful ways or traditions that they celebrate the life of someone and acknowledge the loss of them, I would very much appreciate it if you would email me your story and give me permission to share on here. I had a lovely lady send in hers, and what she does is she buys a bouquet of flowers for her parents' grave, and she divides the flowers in half, and she leaves half the flowers on the grave for her parent that she visits, and she brings the other half home, and she puts them out for herself and anyone that comes over to see. And that touched me to hear. She's honoring that parent and spending time visiting, and then bringing home the flowers where herself and her children and anyone who visits can comment on them or acknowledge that person that's gone, and maybe open a door to share stories about them. And I just think it's such a beautiful, beautiful way to honor her heart and the person that she loves that's no longer physically there. So thank you very much for being here, and I hope that I will hear from you and we can start some conversations. I will be gone for the long weekend. However, I will be pre-recording a live, and I believe I will also be gone the Monday after that. And again, I will pre-record a video for that because I don't want to stop doing the Monday mornings. I think it's important. I think you're important. And I look forward to hearing about your big book of grief rules. And if you have anything that you want to share about a way that you honor your loved one, thank you so much. And I hope the week is full of surprised blessings for you.